Stand by for action.
Welcome to Dogsthorpe Infant School Launchpad.
This is your captain speaking. We've been cleared for departure.
Okay, Eddie, start the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Part of the Hampton Academies Trust. It's the school where stars go to dream, believe and shine.
Welcome back to Eddie's Launchpads. It's the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast for parents, teachers and schools. Wow, over 130 episodes. Where did they all go? Episode 1, I remember it so well, thinking, well, this might last a few weeks, and look at us. Look how far we've come, 130 episodes and literally hundreds of guests. And I've got one waiting on the Launchpad to meet you right now. Now, children have to deal with all sorts of things as they grow up. We all know that. I know I had to. And from the loss of a pet or an elderly relative dying, sadly, relationship problems, or indeed their own medical needs or disabilities. These are when stories and storybooks can often help the child deal with times such as these. And parents and teachers are always on the lookout for new resources. And knowing that all of our listeners around the world, and thank you so much for listening, all you who listen around the world, thank you for joining us. It's always something that we have on our minds when we're planning our podcasts. Our guest on Eddie's Launchpads today is Talya Bruck, and she's the founder of Savanna Therapeutic Stories. Welcome to the show, Talya.
Hi, good afternoon. Lovely to be here.
I know you've got lots of books that you want to share with our listeners today and lots of resources. But before we get on to those, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. So I grew up in South Africa. I've been living in the UK for over 7 years now. And I was initially a drama teacher and came to the UK to study something called drama therapy, which is a form of the arts therapies that helps, anyone really, process and work through difficulties that they might have. And for the majority of my work, I've worked in education. And at the moment, I work in CAMS, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service, as well as working privately in schools. I also supervise other therapists. And I work on a project called Our Time, which has kids' time workshops, and it's working with families where a parent has a mental health difficulty. So it's all about destigmatizing mental health and helping the young people to see that it's not their fault, nothing they've done is wrong, they can't catch their parents' mental health difficulties. So that's the main bread and butter of my work. Sometimes I do workshops as well, all based around kind of mental health and looking at how we can support young people. And then, yes, the founder of Savanna Therapeutic Stories. You know, I don't write all the books by myself. Some of the books are co-authored. And I've been really lucky to find work with some really amazing co-authors who are all therapists and all work in the field of mental health, along with some really amazing illustrators. So I've been really, really lucky.
Yeah, you can see that on the website, which we'll talk about a bit later on, that obviously when it comes to children's storybooks, and particularly for the age group that we work with at Dogsthorpe Infant School, pictures are everything. You know, what say, the Gruffalo or Percy the Park Keeper would be without those wonderful artwork, and you're lucky that you've got some wonderful artists who illustrate your books, because it makes those words come alive for children who, at their age, are thinking in pictures rather than in words.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So where do we begin with these wonderful books? I mean, I've been on your website and there's so much to talk about, and we may go into two parts. We'll see how we get on with time. But what do you want to share with us first?
Well, I suppose it's maybe going back to the origin a little bit to kind of explain how Savanna Therapeutic Stories came about. Um, and it was during COVID where a lot of my school's parents were really worried about obviously what was happening. I mean, none of us ever thought we'd see this in our lifetime. And I was wondering, and it was starting to come out some really creative resources. And I was wondering, well, what could I offer? Like, how could I support? And one of the things I do as a drama therapist is I write therapeutic stories for some of the clients I work with, where I think it will be beneficial for them, because we know that working through the metaphor of story can be really helpful when it's too painful to actually talk about ourselves in that situation. But when we look at characters going through similar situations, it can bring that distance that makes it safe for us to explore. So that's why I kind of thought about, well, I've done story writing before, so perhaps this won't be so hard. And I just started writing something that I thought that could go out to schools, that I could just send to my schools as a PDF. And my friend's daughter, Erin Cooper, it was doing art for her GCSEs. And I said to her, how would you feel about doing a few illustrations for me, just to kind of, like you said, bring the story alive? And she was delighted and said, oh, I'd love to. So, and obviously we're all in our lockdown, so, you know, everyone's really separate. So she did the most brilliant stories for the first book, Hetty's in Lockdown. And it kind of grew from there. So Hetty's in lockdown, and then, of course, things started changing. So we wrote another story with more illustrations, and then we did a third story. And then we went into that big second lockdown, and another drama therapist, Patricia Ojahanman, contacted me and said she also worked for CAMS, and her trust wanted to use one of the stories, but it needed updating because obviously things had changed. So she was like, you know, can we do this? And I said, well, let's do it together. Let's, you know, so we did it, and we did all three of the stories. And those are the three stories that sit on the website, and they're free for anyone to download and have a look at. I suppose they're a little bit of history now, because obviously we're not in that time anymore. And then a colleague of mine said to me at CAMS, we need something on loss, because there have been this awful amount of losses that have happened because of COVID. So I thought, gosh, I wonder how this would work. And I found out about Amazon KDP, which is where you can upload a manuscript. And basically, Amazon does all the work for you. You don't have a publisher as such. Amazon is the publisher. But you retain all your rights. It's all yours. But they just take on printing costs, postage costs, etc. So I wrote Silo's Sadness, which is about young Silo the lion cub who loses his grandfather to the pesky illness that has swept the savannah, which obviously we know is COVID. And all the stories, the COVID stories, had these four little savannah friends throughout, and El the wise elephant, who was there talking to the little ones. So they're all for primary age children, these stories. And Silo comes across El, and she sees he's looking really sad, and she starts to help him process his grief and gives him a name for it. You know, he hasn't heard this word grief before. And so she tells him that this sounds like grief. This is what you are going through. And that was like the first test round. So I took some of the images from all the other stories Erin had illustrated for, and I kind of cobbled them together because I wasn't sure if this was going to work. And it did work. And we got some really good feedback. And what we've also done that makes the book slightly different is at the beginning of the books, there is information on how to help young people start to open up and talk, as well as at the end, there's questions to help you, once you've read the story, to kind of explore the story further. So if you don't feel very confident, you know, maybe as a teacher or a parent, or, you know, even maybe a newly qualified therapist, to explore the themes of what's come up in the story, you can use the questions at the back. And we've also put resources and other helpful books that might be helpful. So we've got websites in there We've got other books that I've used within my therapeutic work that I've really rated and thought were really good resources. So it makes the book a little bit more special, in terms of it's not just, yes, it could be an everyday storybook that you pick up, but it could also be, you're picking it up with the intention of, this is an issue that we're focusing on. Because what I find is that we find it really hard to talk about things that are everyday things. Loss, autism, parental mental illness, bullying, those are all things that happen. Not some of them not so nice, but they're part of our lives. And we as adults can find it really hard to talk about them. So that was the whole thing about Savanna Therapeutic Stories, is about using the stories as a metaphor and as a tool to be opening up those different conversations. So Elle features in all of the books, the COVID stories, which are like forever as a, kind of a memorial, on the website, that are there and free for people to download and use. And then through all the books, Elle is there as well to kind of, she's that, I suppose, that therapist in school, that real safe adult that children can go to, whether it's the therapist, the learning mentor, the Senko, even the head teacher, or, wherever people find, it's about connection, isn't it? What we started adding after Silo's Sadness was we've actually got a foreword for each of the books written by someone in the field. So we've got in the book about parental mental illness, we've got Dimpna Konani from Our Time, which is the one of the organizations I work for. We've got in the autism book, we've got another drama therapist, Dr. Emma Ramsden, who does a lot of work with autistic young people. So I think that's what sets them slightly apart, is that they've got a little bit more than the story to them, which kind of, it becomes more of a, not just a, like I said, you can pick it up and just read them, or you can really kind of, delve deeper into them, use the questions, use the activities. The last book, we've done a workshop for teachers, which is free on the website, that they can use with the book. I hope to be able to do more of that, but it's just a time issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you was from South Africa, and I think I got your name wrong at the beginning. It's Bruck, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Well, Bruck or Bruck. Yeah.
Okay. So, was you brought up in the Savannah area? Was it why did you base it there?
I wasn't brought up in the Savannah area. I was actually brought up in Cape Town. I suppose just the affinity to Africa, and the African wild animals. Not necessarily that I was brought up, around the lions and tigers. Right. Well, not tigers, because those are from India, but the lions and the elephants and the the rest of the Savannah animals, the panthers. It was more just kind of feeling quite African in my roots. And I think the longer I'm here, and I suppose the older I get and I delve into my own past and, kind of my own history, I think I'm very, part of me still remains very proudly African. So I suppose it's about being able to bring that bit of me alive, that I do live here now. I stayed here because I'm married and I've got, my husband and my children. But, part of my heart will always, kind of be in Africa, as it were.
Yeah. It's funny that you should mention that, actually, because we've had somebody who contacted us who said, I think, we hear a lot about Eddie and about all your different guests, and it's great listening, but we know nothing about you. Can you do an episode about you? And I thought, do you know what? We are what we are because of who we were, as much as who we are now. And a lot of our experiences help to shape who we are now.
Absolutely.
And we're always conscious at Dogsthorpe Infants that we've got the age group where characters are still being formed, because, as you know, in your line of of work. Psychologists always say that, if you've not got the child right by the age of 7, by the age of 7, they have built their character. That's, you can adapt them and you can help them to become something else. But often a lot of our initial work is about from the age of 0 to 7. And that's how our character is built. So vital work. And so the work that you do, particularly with this age group and the work we do at the school is helping to flesh future adults. And hopefully them adults, when they get older, when we're all long gone, will say, do you know what? I remember, and that I remember picking up this book talking about silo, Well, I don't know. I just remember it, and that helps to build the person who is the adult that's sitting before you, and it's quite a thing, always like to think that one day there's going to be two guys sitting in a pub somewhere and saying, do you remember that dog they used to have at school? Oh yeah, what was its name? Eddie, that's it. Oh, we used to love that little dog, because that is what builds the character. In regard to other subjects, other issues, you mentioned about autism things. How do you deal with that in your work?
So basically, the next one then we wrote was Tallulah's Rules, which is about a young baboon who's got autism. And so at work, when I released Silo Sadness, 2 colleagues came to me from our neurodevelopmental team and said, oh, could we do one? Could we do one on autism? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, why not? Because, as I said, Silo Sadness was a bit of a test. I wasn't quite sure whether there would be another one. So together with Dr. Stella Moe and Rachel Ryan, 2 colleagues from the CAMS I work in, we wrote Tallulah's Rules. And Tallulah's Rules, firstly, we wanted to highlight autism in girls because girls, we know, often mask about what they're, you look at them and you think, oh, couldn't possibly have autism. But actually, girls learn to mask a lot better than sometimes boys do. And also what we wanted to highlight is that once you've met one autistic person, you've met one. Everyone has, everyone who has autism is different. Their traits, their abilities are different, just like we're different. Everyone who's got autism is different. So we're looking at it from a particular point. We're looking at it from, we did pick up on some of the sensory difficulties, some of the internal rules that someone who's autistic might have. And we hope to portray, some of the elements of autism, about change, so it's about young Tallulah who goes down to the watering hole with her family. And, she desperately wants to play with the other animals, but she's, in her mind, has got all of these different rules and elements. And she's also got the unbearing sun, beating down on her. And the sounds, everything sounds much more louder to her than it does maybe to a neurotypical animal. And you've got, even the prickliness of the grass underneath her feet, so you've got all of these elements. So then she kind of has a little explosion when it all becomes a little bit too much. And then the following day, her and her mum come down to the watering hole again. And then they have this really beautiful conversation with Elle. And mum explains to Elle that actually Tallulah's got autism. And, and then she gets her to play, then she goes and she plays with all the other animals in her time. So again, very beautifully illustrated by Erin Cooper. This was her final illustration for us before she flew the nest. And actually what happened is during this process, Erin also got a diagnosis of autism. And I share it because she writes it in the little bibliography at the back of the book. So I'm not sharing anything she's not happy for to be shared. And I think she, for her, it was a really poignant book to illustrate because she was on her own journey of self-discovery.
And that's the thing about these stories, isn't it? That particularly for children going through it, or for parents to recognise those little things in the character traits, something that telltale starts the suspicion going, thinking, is this autism? Is what's going on. And the great thing about your book is that the children can get lost and talk about the character rather than about themselves, and hopefully see something about themselves and get something from the book, because they're not thinking about themselves, they're thinking about the little baboon who's struggling at the waterhole.
Absolutely. And so we've had feedback from some parents their child says, oh, but she's like me. So they've made those own connections themselves. Really what we wanted from this book was we wanted to be able to give something to, in our particular CAMS, to give something to newly diagnosed primary school children that they could read. And again, there's questions at the back of the book, and that they could also read with siblings, with family members who maybe don't understand what autism is. So it was really about education. And also my aim for all of these books is that every Senko will have a whole set of the books for their school. So if a teacher, for instance, has got someone in class who's got a new diagnosis of autism, and they're trying to talk about it without talking about it, and highlighting that child, but being able to talk about how we're all different, and this is one difference that someone might have, they can use the story to kind of jumpstart, or, like Eddie's Launchpad, launch the conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. Listen, we're getting out of time, and so I'd like to invite Talya back onto the show, because there's another very important issue I want to talk to her about, and it involves bullying. And if you've got a child, or if you've got bullying that's going on in your school, maybe there's some help there. And we'll be talking about that book and where you can get all of these wonderful resources next week. So, in the meantime, thank you for joining us today, Talya. You all right to come back on next week and talk about it?
I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Right, let's get you back on the show. Folks, we'll be back on the next episode, and you know who the guest is going to be. Talya's going to be back, and we're going to be discussing the important issue of bullying, whether that's in school or even at home or out on the streets. Let's try and tackle this, and we'll do that in the next Eddie's Launchpads.
You have been listening to the Dogsthorpe Infant School podcast. Join Captain Dave and his co-pilot Eddie Edster, the well-being dog, on another Launchpad soon. Until then, always remember to be kind, be respectful, and most of all, dream, believe, and shine.
This podcast is brought to you by Eddie Edster, the Dogsthorpe Infant School Wellbeing Dog, bringing hugs, paw shakes and high fives. This Cavalier King Charles Spaniel helps our stars to dream, believe, shine.